Set in the rugged expanse of the Dakota Territories in 1879, The Burrowers unfolds with a haunting stillness characteristic of the Old West. The story is ignited by the mysterious disappearance of a settler family from their homestead, leading the community to assume a Native American raid is responsible. A posse is quickly formed to pursue the suspected attackers, encompassing a blend of seasoned frontiersmen and impetuous youth. Among the volunteers is Fergus Coffey, a quiet yet determined man deeply in love with one of the missing women, Marianne, and driven to rescue her. The posse, led by John Clay, traverses the expansive plains, gradually uncovering unsettling signs that challenge their initial assumptions. They come across shallow graves containing mutilated bodies, revealing evidence of a threat far more insidious than a mere human adversary. The group has an encounter with indigenous scouts who forewarn them that their hunt is misdirected. The scouts introduced the concept of the Burrowers, ancient subterranean entities that capture their victims by paralyzing them with venom and subsequently dragging them underground to feast on them. Despite these grave warnings, the predominantly white posse dismisses the Native Americans' claims as mere superstition, holding steadfast to the belief that the true danger lies in human foes. This hubris ultimately leads to their downfall as members of the squad begin to vanish without a trace. Those remaining behind are met with ghastly revelations. Victims are found drugged and buried alive, subjected to a horrific feeding ritual that allows the Burrowers to consume their prey slowly and torturously. As the situation worsens and the number of survivors diminishes, unease permeates the group. Internal strife escalates, particularly with Will Parcher, who spirals into doubt regarding everything they've believed. Only Coffey appears open to the indigenous perspective, grappling with the notion that their adversary is beyond human understanding, while the hope for Marianne's survival wanes. The arrival of military forces led by the ruthless Colonel Henry adds a further layer of chaos. More absorbed in his brutal campaign against the native population than in uncovering the truth about the Burrowers, he and his troops launch a violent offensive. The Colonel's extreme prejudice results in the torture of a native guide for information, and despite clear warnings about the danger they face, he resorts to scorched earth tactics, illogically attempting to vanquish the creatures through fire and artillery. In essence, the Burrowers serves as a dark metaphor for mistrust and the consequences of ignoring wisdom from those who have lived alongside ancient threats, leading to a tragic confrontation with forces beyond their comprehension. In The Burrowers, Coffey and his remaining allies adopt a more reflective strategy to confront the monstrous Burrowers, realizing that the creature's aggression stems from a disrupted ecosystem. The settlers' poisoning of the land, particularly through the extermination of buffalo, formerly the Burrowers' food source, has caused a fundamental imbalance. As the natural order collapses, the Burrowers shift their diet to humans, a consequence of settlers' ignorance and violence which has awakened an ancient terror. Coffey embarks on a harrowing expedition into a Burrower nest underground, navigating claustrophobic tunnels littered with cocooned bodies in various states of decay. The Burrowers themselves are depicted as pale insectoid beings that have evolved unnoticed in the frontier's depths. During this treacherous exploration, Coffey discovers Marianne partially entombed and immobilized by venom intended as sustenance for the creatures. Despite his efforts to rescue her, he quickly realizes that the trauma and toxin have rendered her survival impossible. As the narrative hurtles towards its climax, the few remaining men engage in a desperate attempt to obliterate the Burrowers using fire. Although they manage to kill several creatures, it becomes increasingly evident that their efforts have not eradicated the threat. The military's reckless interventions have merely expanded the creatures' range, illustrating the futility of their actions. Coffey emerges from this ordeal severely affected, burdened by the loss of Marianne and the sobering realization that the true horror lies not in the creatures themselves but in the settlers' ignorance and brutality, qualities that blind them to the reality of their situation. The film concludes with a grim resonance. Coffey, now isolated, surfaces into an unchanged world deeply altered by his experiences. He comprehends that the Burrowers remain hidden beneath the earth, poised to strike again. The closing scenes suggest an unsettling future, hinting that the horror is not consigned to the past but lingers concealed from a society too hubristic to acknowledge the warnings of those who had the foresight to recognize the threat. The thematic depth of the Burrowers transcends typical horror narratives. It functions as a cautionary tale about colonial hubris, environmental neglect, and the reluctance of dominant cultures to inherit and understand the knowledge of the oppressed. The Burrowers symbolize the dire repercussions of upsetting ecological balances. By decimating buffalo and advancing westward heedlessly, settlers unknowingly incite a perilous force beyond their comprehension. The film also subverts conventional notions of heroism within the Western genre, as the posse's initial confidence gives way to a stark realization of their ignorance and vulnerability. Ultimately, the real Burrowers are the men themselves, probing into realms they cannot comprehend, awakening malevolent forces that challenge their simplistic narratives of bravery and justice. The Burrowers subverts traditional Western tropes by infusing existential horror into its narrative, presenting a landscape dominated by dread and creating an atmosphere of tension rather than relying on jump scares. The vast desolate plains of the Dakota Territory in 1879 act as a chilling backdrop, amplifying the film's unsettling tone. Its minimalist use of monstrous creatures maximizes their impact, fostering a profound sense of terror when they finally appear. The film's quiet and tragic resonance remains long after it concludes, as it offers no easy resolutions or moments of triumph, instead leaving viewers with an overwhelming sense of unease regarding history, the natural world, and the true horrors that arise when humanity refuses to confront uncomfortable realities. The story unfolds in a serene prairie setting where a settler family's abrupt and mysterious disappearance one night sends ripples of panic through the community. Without any evidence of a struggle, the only remnants of their presence are the silent, eerie surroundings. The locals quickly jump to conclusions, attributing the abductions to Native American raiders. Fergus Coffey, a quiet frontiersman whose love Marianne is among the missing, joins a posse led by the hardened John Clay and accompanied by fellow settlers Will Parcher and Dobie Spax. They venture into the wilderness driven by the belief they are tracking hostile tribes. As the group journeys across the plains, unsettling discoveries challenge their assumptions. They uncover shallow graves housing mutilated bodies with remnants indicating an inhumane treatment. One corpse appears paralyzed and buried alive, instigating panic within the ranks. While the rest of the posse dismiss these horrors as the work of savages, Coffey begins to sense a more sinister force at play. Their expedition continues until they encounter a Native American tracker who warns cryptically of underground creatures that stalk at night, drugging their prey before entombing them alive, but the posse disregards this as mere superstition. The search intensifies, but the stakes rise dramatically when a member of the group disappears under the cover of darkness alongside horrifying screams. When he is discovered later, he is half buried and suffering from paralysis and poisoning, compelling the men to consider that an unnatural predator is hunting them. Eventually they cross paths with another group of Native Americans who share crucial insights about the creatures known as the Burrowers. Once preying on bison, these insect-like beings turned to humans after the settlers decimated buffalo populations, an ecological imbalance that the native tribes attempted to manage through ritual and stewardship, illustrating the dire consequences of the settlers' disruption. Wounded from a Burrower's attack, Parcher, now fully aware of the threat posed by the creatures, implores Coffey to help him, revealing more about their tactics and emphasizing the urgency of the situation. Despite Parcher's injuries, he shares valuable insights that reinforce Coffey's belief in the necessity of a more strategic approach to combating the Burrowers. Coffey, filled with determination and urgency, decides to venture deeper into the affected area, seeking not just to save Marianne but also to gather intelligence that could prove beneficial against the Burrowers. He reflects on the lessons learned from the frightened native boy and understands that they must incorporate stealth and strategy instead of brute force. However, Clay and the other hunters remain torn. Clay is steadfast in his belief that they can defeat the creatures with conventional tactics despite the mounting evidence against it. Tensions rise within the group as Coffey's new strategy calls for more patience and attention to detail, something they are not accustomed to after a prolonged period of aggression and raids. Still, Coffey's resolve inspires some of the group members to reconsider their approach, and they begin to weigh his insights against Clay's aggressive push forward. As Coffey embarks on his mission, he encounters more signs of the Burrowers' existence, remnants of their victims, and the eerie quiet that pervades the landscape. He recognizes that the creatures are far more cunning and strategic than originally assumed, emphasizing the need for caution as they work to save Marianne and stop the Burrowers from claiming more lives. Meanwhile, Colonel Henry's campaign escalates, resulting in increased civilian casualties and the alienation of the native tribes. His disregard for the 90 natives only serves to intensify hostilities rather than alleviate the threat posed by the Burrowers. It is evident that his ruthless methods might spur more conflict and despair rather than resolving the actual problem. As the story progresses, Coffey's quest intertwines with the larger conflict, highlighting the dichotomy between brute force and strategic thought. Each character's actions and decisions come to a head, setting up a tense confrontation with the Burrowers and a moral reckoning regarding the cost of victory. The desperate situation compels them to confront their fears, reassess their strategies, and ultimately determine what they are willing to sacrifice to survive. If you enjoy watching this video, then subscribe to Angel Recaps for the latest movies explanation.